in California. Is that Glendora?
Yes, Glendora, California.
Go right ahead.
Hello. My question is, as a private citizen, how can I fund money to the Afghanistan freedom fighters without breaking any neutrality laws?
Oh, there are many, many ways that you can do that. If you would, I don't know whose congressional district you live in, but if you would just contact your own congressman, he'll be happy to tell you there are many agencies and many private foundations that are furnishing humanitarian assistance to the Afghans. And if your congressman doesn't know, which I'm sure he does, but if he doesn't, there's only one Wilson in Congress, so if you'd write me a letter, I'll be happy to direct you in the right direction. In California itself, in Los Angeles, there's one very, very fine group called International Medical Corps that raises private money, mostly in California, and trains doctors to go in and to heal the sick in Afghanistan.
Thanks for the call. Let's go to Caldwell, New Jersey. Go ahead.
Hello, Congressman Wilson. I have a concern mainly about the more radical fundamentalist groups. Do you fear that Iran's influence over them may continue, if there is any to begin with, or may become an overpowering influence, especially considering Iran's goal of exporting as much of their fundamentalism as possible?
I really do not, because I think that the Afghans have such a hatred of the Soviet Union and of what the Soviets have done to them that I think that they're going to direct most of their emotion toward being sure that the Soviets don't invade them or abuse them again. Also, the the Muslims in Afghanistan are not Shiites as they are in Iran. I'm not a great student of the Muslim religion, but it's my understanding that the non-Shiites are much less likely to have this very radical anti-Western attitude. I believe that the Afghanis, I don't believe they'll be members of NATO. I don't believe that they'll have discotheques and that their women will stop wearing veils. But I do believe that they basically appreciate what the United States has done for them, and most of all, they fear and hate the idea of communism.
Thanks for the call. Let's go to Newport Beach. What's your question or comment?
Yes, I actually have an interesting overall question about why does Congress support activities in Afghanistan versus something that's in the news in Nicaragua, and why is there seemingly more support for the Afghans in Nicaragua?
That's a very, very good question, and it's asked many times. But the basic reason, in my judgment, now I'd like for you to understand that I support the Contras as well as the Afghan freedom fighters. I've always voted for the Contras with enthusiasm, and I was disappointed when it failed the other night. But basically, the Afghan war is a morally unambiguous war. And in Central America, as you know, there are many Americans that do have feelings of ambiguity about that war. There are many Americans that think that the United States is on the wrong side. There are many Americans that think that the Sandinistas are the will of the people in Nicaragua. I don't think that, but many of my colleagues do, obviously. Congress is split just about in half. But there's no one opposed to the Mujahideen because they've proven themselves to be so courageous, and they have, in fact, been invaded by the Red Army. And they are, in fact, engaging Russians in mortal combat. So I presume that's the reason.
Thanks for the call. Let's go to Houston, Texas. What's your question or comment?
I have a question to Congressman regarding this issue. Number one is that fundamentalism carries a negative connotation. I think this is not fair. Number two, the Afghan Mujahideen have been fighting long before U.S. gave them any aid. And they will continue to fight it regardless whether aid is given or it is stopped. Their fight is not to to obey the Eastern philosophy or the Western philosophy. They are not interested in joining the Russian hegemony or accept it in one form or another, regardless. They're not going to do it. On that point, there's no room for any negotiations. They do accept all the rest of the countries and respect their rights and their right to exist in the world and negotiate and trade and so on. I think these fears that have been brewing about is based on some of the Russian propaganda, that they want to tell everybody that these mujahideen cannot be trusted, so let's bring the king back or bring this guy back. He's more amenable to dealing with us. Well, they were fighting against the Shah, King Zahir Shah, a long time ago, long before they ousted him, his own people.
Okay, thank you.
So I think this should be a positive note, because we should stand for freedom, regardless of whether this guy comes back in our sphere of influence or not, as long as they take care of their own people.
I agree with everything the caller said.
Congressman, one of the comments that caller made had to do with how well they now get along with their neighbors and will get along with their neighbors presumably in the future. Let's talk about Pakistan a little bit. What do you expect the relations will be down the road between...
They're both Muslim countries. They consider themselves brothers. The Pakistanis are extremely sympathetic to the hardships that the Afghans have suffered. On the other hand, and the Pakistanis have endured hardship themselves in order to furnish a home, a place for the refugees to live. On the other hand, the Afghans are very appreciative to the Pakistanis for what they've done for them. So I think they'll have an extremely good relationship. And I would point out to you and to the audience that throughout history, Afghanistan has never had any problem with their neighbors, except when their neighbors invaded them. And they don't take kindly to that.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to Seattle, Washington.
Thank you, C-SPAN. I was just listening this morning to Senator Kerry's congressional hearings, and he had the former counsel to Panama on there testifying that some of the arms that we ship to the Afghan rebels, including Stinger missiles, are being sold on the black market over there and being transferred through Panama to the communist guerrillas in El Salvador. If the congressman could respond to that. I'll hang up and wait for your response.
That is absolutely false. That is absolutely false. We know where the Stinger missiles are that have gone to Afghanistan, and they have not gone to Panama. I have great regard for Senator Kerry, but it wasn't Senator Kerry that said that. That was someone who was testifying before his committee, and that guy was just wrong.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to, is that Beverly Hills?
No, Beverly, Massachusetts.
Go ahead.
About 3,000 miles away. I'm wondering, why is it that we only get worked up about dictatorships when they involve communism? Most of our hemisphere, all of Central and South America, is living in poverty and for years has been under one type of dictatorship, usually right-wing. The only place that's even close to a democracy is Canada, but everybody else is under some kind of a dictatorship. And around the world, we do business with dictatorships. We set up banana republics. The only thing you guys get worked up about is if there happens to be communism, and how come?
Oh, I don't think that's true. But in this case, it's basically because this was a small, neutral, unarmed, agrarian society invaded by the Red Army, and the people there chose to put up a heroic battle. And they were deemed worthy of our support. And they got it. And they're winning. And that's good.
We have about 20 minutes to go if you have a question or comment for Congressman Wilson. Let's go back to Seattle, Washington. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a comment on the congressman's reply to the earlier question relative to why the Contras don't seem to be supported, but the Afghan rebels are. I think it's an unrealistic characterization to say that there are a large number of people who are interested in, or rather who feel that the Sandinistas are somehow the good side. I think it's more accurate to characterize the country as containing a bunch of people who feel that the Contras are freedom fighters, which I personally don't support. I think they're fighting freedom, not fighting for it. And a large number of people who feel that both sides, the Sandinistas are a bunch of bums, happen to be left-wing bums. The Contras are headed, even though there's a lot of popular support now among the people carrying guns, the Somocitas and the drug runners are still running it. You know, Arturo Cruz didn't leave for no reason. and that you've got a bunch of right-wing bums running the Contras. I think if we had a really popular democratic uprising in the form of the Contras, if Arturo Cruz, if the CIA, for instance, went out and shot everybody as head of the Contras right now and installed Arturo Cruz, I think you'd see a lot of change in the attitudes of people like Brock Adams and Mike Lowry. I think they could support a group of Contras headed by a really democratic group, not just a bunch of thugs. I'll listen to the comment off the air. Thank you.
Well, I don't, have a comment. You really commented, but your comments were evidence of a serious split in American opinion about the worthiness or the unworthiness of the Contras. On the other hand, you don't hear that kind of split concerning the Mujahideen. Everybody thinks the Mujahideen are worthy of our support.